Hey guys, Pieguyrulz here, and welcome back to Nick or Treat. Tonight we have a Rocket Power episode, The Night Before. The boys go out on Mischief Night despite the curfew. So this episode makes an interesting choice in having it take place primarily on Mischief Night as opposed to Halloween. So it's refreshingly different. Unfortunately, that's about the only good thing I can say about this thing. I don't like this episode. Not very much happens, and what does happen is insanely predictable. First off, the characters are really bland in this episode. I can't tell the difference between Otto and Twister based on their personalities. I don't really know how they differentiate. And even Sam in this episode, who I know is usually more cautious, is acting like Otto and Twister, so he doesn't really come off like that much of a different character either. Actually, the only personality that I do get from these characters is that they're kind of jerks. They go out on Mischief Night and consistently make fun of Squid, Sam. I think they're going for an, oh, they're just harmless kids doing harmless pranks, so whatever type of vibe. It might just be me, but they don't come off as likable at all in this episode. So most of the episode is about the three boys and, I don't know, one of their friends running around trying to prank people on Mischief Night, although they don't really end up going through with much of it. So it's mostly just them running around in the dark. Reg decides not to go out with them because she knows there's a curfew and they'll get sent to jail or something if they break it. She consistently warns them throughout the beginning of the episode to not go out and that she's not going to tattle on them, but they shouldn't be doing it and blah blah blah. Eventually she gets worried enough about them that she decides to try and seek them out to warn them again. And of course, that's when the police show up and only see her, and she's the one that gets in trouble. And of course, Otto and the rest of them decide to come clean and not let her take the fall for something they did. This episode is very anvilicious, and I get that some anvils need to be dropped, but please do it in a less obvious way. The episode's not funny either. The only line I liked was when they're about to TP a house and decide not to, and then it's revealed that it's actually Sam's house. That part was kind of funny, but a lot of the other humor just falls completely flat. There's a point where the boys hear a dog and they see a shadow that makes it look like a big scary dog, and they're talking about, oh, it must be a pit bull, it must be so scary and big, and obviously the joke is that it's gonna be a really tiny dog. Maybe they could have gotten away with it if they didn't try to bash it over our heads that herder, this is totally a big scary dog chasing them. Oh, and another bad thing about this episode, the colors are muted when they're outside in the dark, obviously to emulate the darkness. This wouldn't be such a bad thing except for the fact that most of the episode takes place outside in the dark. So a lot of this episode is just a very muted color palette. In an already pretty boring and predictable episode, it's like this episode is trying to tell me to just fall asleep. I do not recommend this episode. When I say it's boring and bland, I mean even more so than Doug. It's probably the worst I've reviewed this Halloween. At least with Rugrats, there's a little bit of interest in where exactly they're going to go with the episode, but with this, it's so boring and so predictable all the way through. And here's the thing, I'm not a big fan of Rocket Power. My opinion of it is basically the same as Ren and Stimpy. I appreciate it, I don't think it's a bad show in general, but it's not meant for me. I'm not into sports and I never was. But the thing is, there are no sports in this episode, so that is not interfering with my enjoyment levels. I think it's just pretty bad. Man, this review's negative. Let me think about some other things that could potentially be positives about this episode. Well, interestingly enough, it's also episode 13A, much like SpongeBob. I didn't just mess up the slide this time. That actually is the same production number as the SpongeBob episode, which is interesting. Oh, and this episode features the Rocket family holiday traditions that reappears again much later in a Rocket Xmas. That's cool, right? Yeah, this episode sucks. Pieguyrulz, out.